Good afternoon. In Gaza, the war grinds on. July 11th, 2025. Today is yet another harrowing day in a conflict that has claimed tens of thousands of lives and displaced over 1 million people. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes hit a school sheltering civilians in northern Gaza, killing 10 and injuring many more. A day earlier, a strike near a health clinic in Deir el-Balah killed more than a dozen Palestinians, including families waiting for aid. As the humanitarian situation collapses and international calls for a ceasefire grow even louder, indirect negotiations continue in Qatar. But on the ground, Gaza's streets remain filled with rubble and grief as diplomacy trails behind the destruction. In today's special coverage of Gaza, we examine the crisis from multiple angles, starting with the human toll before turning to the political complexities shaping its future. All this and more coming up. Welcome. An Israeli airstrike killed at least 15 Palestinians, including 8 children, near a medical point in central Gaza. Yesterday, an Israeli airstrike struck near the health center in Deir el-Balah, killing at least 15 Palestinians, including 8 children. According to The Guardian, the victims were waiting outside a Project Hope clinic for nutritional supplements and medical aid when the attack occurred. Graphic footage showed lifeless bodies and frantic rescue efforts, underscoring the deepening humanitarian crisis as violence intensifies and ceasefire talks stall. Project Hope has since suspended operations at the clinic for safety reasons. As I just mentioned, an Israeli airstrike near a health clinic run by the American aid group Project Hope in Deir el-Balah in Gaza killed over a dozen people, including children. The New York Times stated that civilians had gathered outside the clinic for nutrition aid while the strike happened. Gaza's health ministry reported 18 dead from the strike and over 55,000 total deaths since the war began. Despite ongoing ceasefire talks, Israeli attacks continue amid accusations that Hamas operates in civilian areas. The war has created severe humanitarian conditions with widespread hunger and displacement. Now we're going to be joined from Cairo by Mohammed Omar, who is a political science researcher. Welcome to the program. So the number of civilian casualties continues to mount. I just mentioned 55,000, can be up to more than 57,000 in some estimations. What do you think is the strategy of Israel here?
First of all, greetings to you and to the viewers. In fact, the Israeli occupation and the Netanyahu government insist on continuing the killing and the massacres carried out in the Gaza Strip. As you have mentioned earlier, we're talking about 60,000 martyrs so far and 150,000 wounded and tens of thousands missing. And during the visit of Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House last Monday, and that was concluded today, and he was back to Israel, no there has been no announcement of any agreement in spite of all leaks either by Israel or Washington regarding that we're close to any agreement. But in fact, we have not seen any announcement, only formal announcement yet. Violence is growing in Gaza and in the West Bank. The Israeli military sent two extra task force today to West Bank as the death toll is increasing in Gaza. We're talking about 800 martyrs since 27th of May. They were killed during waiting for aid provided by the GHF, supervised by Israel and the United States. So the increasing death toll shows us the insistence of the Israeli government to carry out the genocide and not to reach a ceasefire agreement as stated by Trump or even Netanyahu or Israeli media that we might see in a deal soon. All that we can see is more dead bodies and more victims either in Gaza or in the West Bank.
Yes, well, I mean, sadly that's true, isn't it? And when it comes to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF, as you mentioned, there have been many attacks, such as this one in Deir al-Balah, with people standing outside waiting for aid. 15 people at least dead in this attack, and of course at various GHF venues as well, not just hospitals. Why do you think such attacks continue despite the fact that there has been global condemnation?
Certainly, as you have mentioned, the GHF is now points are now death traps. We're talking about 800 people killed only because they went to obtain some aid to find something to eat or to drink after a month of complete starvation. And even since October 7th, there are several alternative mechanisms to distribute aid to the Palestinian people, and represented in the United Nations and the UNRWA and several other humanitarian institutions. Several alternatives and mechanisms that were active and efficient before distribution points that were able to reach across the Gaza Strip. Today, what we are seeing because of the GHF is more killing and more wounded and not more aid distributed. Of course, it's very suspicious. How can the entire Israeli military not secure the aid distribution process and announce safe routes for people to go through, and they turn out to be death traps and they get shot only to get a simple meal for their starved children for now more than 20 months because of the fight. The solution now is to end the GHF and to allow the United Nations and the UNRWA and any other mechanisms to be agreed upon with Israel and the United States that can be actually efficient and able to provide aid, food and medicine. The Palestinian people only demand that this can be for the supervision of the United States and for the entire world. It's going to be bread and water and very few medical supplies to treat the people that are being targeted on a daily basis since the beginning of the aggressions.
Yes, it does seem very much that these so-called humanitarian corridors are basically target practice for the IDF. Now, these strikes are occurring even while negotiations are underway in Qatar. What message does this send to the mediators? Does it get them to get a move on and get some kind of ceasefire sorted?
In fact, Israel is sending messages that they will continue the killing. They do not want a real deal to be reached. Each time we reach a point of agreement with the Palestinian factions, Israel comes back to impose new terms Even the agreement that they have been working on for days in Qatar was not even accepted for Netanyahu, and they imposed new terms. There was a proposal even accepted by the United States for a 60-day truce. During them, half of the detainees will be released, around 25 detainees, and talking and discussing the Hamas disarmament and finding a mechanism for humanitarian access. Netanyahu went to the White House and talked about getting all the detainees in the 60 days, and in exchange he did not pledge or provide any guarantees to end the war permanently. Hamas wants to give all the detainees, to release all the detainees and the dead bodies in exchange for guarantees for a permanent ceasefire. Netanyahu did not accept. He only wants the truce, a pause for the war, and he did not talk about a permanent end to the war. When we talk about any or reach any part of an agreement, he goes back to with a new terms, and he wants to take Hamas completely out of the scene. The humanitarian aid issue has not been discussed. He is talking about controlling most of the Gaza Strip, especially Rafah and the Morag corridor, establishing a buffer zone in the Gaza perimeter with a kilometer deep. We're talking about most of the Strip, establishing a humanitarian city south of the Gaza Strip, to which around 600,000 Palestinians will be pushed and displaced. It will be a trap, a ghetto to isolate the Palestinian population and to force them further to evacuate to outside of the Strip. Netanyahu came back from the White House with more support, more political cover, and not reaching any real agreement. He will continue stalling even the foreign to the state of the Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Israel has all the right to demand what they are demanding, and they need to eliminate any further threats.
And how do you think the international community has responded? Has it been just rhetoric, or are there firm mechanisms that they could put into place to try and do something about this terrible situation that people are facing in Gaza?
In fact, the Palestinian people has been facing atrocities since the October 7th. We are now approaching the second year of hostilities, and we're only seeing rhetoric and condemnations. We're talking about mere calls. The European countries and the West are able to take actual measures to pressure Israel, or through international organizations, or through the Security Council. What we see now is Netanyahu taking complete freedom to do whatever they please in the Gaza Strip of starvation and killing and hostilities, and now it's also the West Bank. The international community has not moved actively to set a mechanism for accountability. Even we have not seen any weapon embargoes on Israel. How can you condemn a hostile war against an unarmed population without posing an embargo on weapons? Especially that these states are active in the world order, and they are very able of putting real pressure on Israel and the United States. Why wouldn't the European Union so far suspend the trade agreement with Israel? It's been 20 months of hostilities and starvations. Now they are examining the possibility of suspending the trade agreement, and this must have been done months ago. Now a lot of powers in the European Union are still supporting the Israeli stance. We're talking the international community has not taken any real measure to stop the Israeli aggression or to end the war, and most importantly, to find a real, just, permanent solution for the issue by establishing a Palestinian and recognizing a Palestinian state on the borders of 1967. There has been no agreement, and the international community, decades ago, if they recognized a Palestinian state, we wouldn't have seen such massacres from the first place.
And as you mentioned, Western governments, they're probably not doing enough to sort the situation out. There are obviously reports of famine, lack of access to food, to water, to healthcare. The scale of suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza perhaps shift public opinion of people in the West that could force their governments to act?
In fact, I have a bit of a pessimistic outlook. If the West wanted to do anything, they would have done it by now. It has been 20 months of ongoing hostilities. They are able to pressure Netanyahu to stop the war and to enter the humanitarian aid. None of this happened. They didn't push to enter a meal or a drink of water through even international capable organizations. What happened in the framework of a deal in November for the first time, or in January 2024, was only a temporary deal where Israel obtained and got some of its detainees back to portray a better picture of Trump, that he came for peace, and the internal position of Netanyahu. But on the ground, there has been no measures to improve the situation for Gaza. They have not been moved by the ongoing massacres in Gaza for 20 months, and it has been actually years of atrocities against the Palestinian people, and they were not moved by any of that, so why would they move now? The West has priorities regarding Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Syria, and the Middle East, and their relations with China, or even finding an understanding with Trump regarding the tariffs imposed on the European states. They have other certain priorities, and the Gaza Strip was dropped out of these priorities because they see it as a burden, and they have not provided anything tangible to end the tragedy.
And Mohammed Omar, what do you think? Do you think we are close to a genuine ceasefire at this stage?
I don't think we are anywhere near it, not enough anyway. Now they are talking about a 60-day truce, a temporary agreement. Netanyahu does not want to end the war because he did not achieve his goals, which is eliminating any existence of Hamas militarily or politically in Gaza. He did not define the future of Gaza the next day to the war. Netanyahu did not decide on that yet, whether during the negotiations or during his last visit to the White House or during the talks with Egypt and Qatar, the mediators. What he's talking about now is a 60-day truce, and after that, if it succeeds, we will look into ending the war. The Israeli troops are still there in Gaza. They completely reject any withdrawal of the Israeli army from Gaza. How can we have a ceasefire with the Israeli occupying 2/3 of the Gaza Strip, which is only at 360 kilometers? If you have 2/3 of this area, where will the Palestinians exist? And how can they move with the occupation troops exercising the killing and withholding aid? So there will be no agreement except with the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza and reaching a mechanism to rule the Strip in the future. We were hopeful that Trump would actually pressure Netanyahu during the visit to the White House for 5 days, but he came back with all the support to continue the war. He did not talk even about the ceasefire.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you there because we're just out of time, but thank you very much indeed for joining us here on the program. Mohammed Omar, political science researcher. Thank you very much indeed. Now, while the human toll continues to rise, questions loom large about the future. What did these strikes signal about Israel's endgame? How are internal politics in Tel Aviv and Gaza shaping the war's trajectory and the day after? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's recent meeting with Donald Trump revealed no signs of pressure to ease Gaza's suffering. According to the conversation, instead, discussions reportedly centered on relocating Palestinians abroad, a proposal critics deem ethnic cleansing. Defense Minister Israel Katz's plan to confine Gazans in a humanitarian city, quote, at Rafah with no exit except exile, has sparked international outrage. Experts warn such measures violate international law, possibly amounting to war crimes. Despite ICC arrest warrants, Netanyahu visited Washington unimpeded as the U.S. rejects the court's jurisdiction. Meanwhile, regional powers, including Egypt, Jordan, and Gulf states, oppose forced displacement. Analysts agree without ending the war, Israel faces deepening isolation, yet Netanyahu's coalition remains firmly opposed to any ceasefire. Now, joining us is the international relations specialist, Dr. Mohammed Osman, and also the writer and political analyst, Ahmed Maharam. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us here. I'll start with you, Dr. Osman. What do you believe is Israel's strategic objective at this stage of the war? Are you there, Dr. Osman?
Yes, sir. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, of course. What do you think Israel's strategic objective is at this stage of the war?
I think that now the strategic objective of Netanyahu and his government right now, especially the ultra-right-wing component of his government, is to stall as long as possible until he can control about 75% of the Gaza Strip. Right now, Netanyahu or the Israelis control about 65% or a bit more of the territory of the Gaza Strip. They seek to depopulate this entire area and limit the existence of the Gaza population to a very narrow strip of land near the coast, including in the so-called humanitarian city down south in Rafah, which will be basically one of the largest concentration camps in the world since Auschwitz, something that is unprecedented in over 8 decades. And it's rather ironic that a country that calls itself the Jewish state will inflict upon the Palestinians what has been inflicted upon the Jews of Europe by the Nazis, unfortunately. I think Netanyahu's endgame is paving the way during a ceasefire or even a prolonged ceasefire or truce for the idea of the forced displacement of Palestinians under the guise of voluntary departure or voluntary relocation. And I think that this so-called humanitarian city, it being controlled by proxy militias of mercenaries, Palestinians who are associated with the Israeli army of occupation, these militias that will lead administering these areas means that the Israelis will not have to pay a human toll by maintaining and governing a population, risking taking casualties and whatnot. So it seems that there is an end game, and I think that the end game is Netanyahu is trying to postpone the ceasefire for a week or two until he can control the areas of Gaza he wants to control and permanently depopulate them. And it seems that the United States is on board with Israel on that. What Trump seems to be asking Netanyahu is to expedite the matter, to make it faster because he wants to de-escalate tensions in the region because he has a fish to fry in other parts of the world. He thinks that the Middle East needs to settle down. Israel needs to exercise this regional hegemony supported by the United States. And I think that this is the Trump vision for the region. And I think that Netanyahu is perfectly in line with Trump's policies. I think all of this nonsense about simmering tensions between them or that there are strong dividing disagreements, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. So I want to bring in Ahmed Muharrem and ask, what are your views on this so-called humanitarian area for people of Gaza? Dr. Osman calling it ironic, as basically they would be creating some kind of concentration camp within Gaza. What are your views on that?
Well, I think after all this kind of strange way of dealing with how many hundreds have lost their life because of the mass using this kind of humanitarian distribution, I think what is happening is exactly what Israel was trying to do, is to succeed to kill as much as they can from the Palestinians. Now I think UNRWA has the right to come back again strongly, and I think the international feeling, the international community has to push more the both sides of Americans and the Israeli in order that UNRWA always the right people and the people that are capable to do that, no matter what happens. I think we have to encourage UNRWA has to come back again by all means.
Yes, it does very much seem like UNRWA need to get back in there and replace the GHF, but it seems the Americans and the Israelis are not keen on doing so. What would you say, Dr. Osman, with these negotiations going on in Qatar and the discussions, of course, in Washington as well? What are the biggest obstacles that are being faced?
Steve Witkoff falsely claimed, it seems, that there were 4 outstanding issues and only 1 remains. Apparently, he's a pathological liar. It seems that there are many things that have not been agreed upon by both negotiating parties, including the essence and the nature of this temporary 60-day ceasefire. It seems that some of the core elements of this agreement have not been, both sides have not come to terms with yet. For example, Hamas rightfully demands that Israel should at least withdraw to the lines of March 2025, meaning that all of the territories they have acquired after restarting the war, they should evacuate it. And that in itself is a concession because Hamas is not asking anymore for the full withdrawal of the Israeli army of occupation from Gaza. However, the Israelis are very steadfast in their position and are adamant that they will maintain most of the territories they have occupied, especially the Murad corridor down south, where they are set to establish this vile concentration camp they call a humanitarian city, unfortunately. This seems to be a deal breaker, an existential difference between both sides. Also, there seems to be a disagreement on whether on what are the terms of a permanent ceasefire afterwards. Both sides have agreed that talks will be conducted during the 60 days to reach a permanent ceasefire. However, Netanyahu, as usual, threw a landmine in the mix yesterday by saying, yes, a permanent cessation of hostilities would require that Hamas completely disarm and leave the Gaza Strip without even offering any guarantee there will be a legitimate Palestinian governance of the Strip after Hamas. Not even the idea, for example, of returning the PA, the Palestinian Authority, to Gaza is rejected by the Israelis and the United States alike. It seems they don't seem to be very interested in that. So it seems that even the idea of the day after the war and the very important details of the ceasefire have not been agreed upon. So instead of 4 outstanding issues, there seems to be 100 outstanding issues, unfortunately. However, I do believe that probably within the next week or 10 days, we just might see a temporary ceasefire in order to secure the release of half of the detainees, because Trump is pushing for that. Hamas is in a very weakened position. They are now more susceptible to accepting certain Israeli and American demands. However, of course, they cannot concede everything all at once because now they are facing an existential threat, and they owe a certain responsibility to the people not to abandon them entirely. So it seems that we are far from seeing a definitive end to this war, at least along the parameters that we had imagined and hoped for.
Okay.
It will end, but it will end on the terms of the Israelis, unfortunately.
All right. And coming back to you, Ahmed Baharam, do you think internal politics are playing quite a large role when it comes to the discussions and the negotiations? But also, how are the internal politics influencing the military strategy when it comes to what's happening on the ground?
Well, internal policy is almost the mirror of foreign policy, because each country has its own itself. Internal policy means the citizens, the population, the Congress, the people, they have, power to enhance the up power to go to the foreign policy. I think what's happened now in both countries, in Israel and America, I think as well, both population, the Israeli and the Americans, have faced so many troubles for the last 2 years and upcoming months as well. So I think the pressure will come from the citizens of both countries themselves, plus the authorities, ministries, cabinets, and so on, will do some kind of push to enhance to the leaders, the decision makers, to have a strength recognition of how internal policy has very good impact to the outside or international policy. I think within the next few weeks or months, America has to face a very strong decisions to be taken to the Middle East, only to defend the Israeli and to put their friends in a very shape situation. I think President Trump in a situation has to do something different than what he's supposed to do previously.
And coming back to you, Dr. Osman, what do you think it signals about U.S. policy toward Gaza and towards the ICC when arrest warrants aren't upheld? Is the international justice system a bit of a laughingstock at the moment?
It being a laughingstock aside, and that's a given fact, unfortunately, but we have to be in a way objective when we are trying to approach this. The United States is not a signatory of the Rome Statute and is not a member of the International Criminal Court. So they are completely entitled to not enforce any arrest warrants that is issued by, or any decisions that are issued by this court. However, ironically, the United States, on the other hand, played a pivotal role historically in creating this court and establishing it. I was very happy when this court was issuing arrest warrants against leaders like Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, President Putin of Russia, and many other foreign leaders who were subjected to at least arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court with a U.S. blessing and U.S. backing at the time. On the other hand, when arrest warrants were issued against Netanyahu, the court was subjected to U.S. unilateral illegal sanctions. And of course, this is something that is rather unprecedented and does sabotage the legitimacy and the significance of these international legal organizations, unfortunately, and makes the idea of the universality of international justice a laughingstock, as you have just described it.
Okay.
Mark.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to Ahmed Baharam one more time. We've just got around about a minute and a half left. Dr. Osman thinks perhaps in the next 10 days we might have some kind of ceasefire. What do you think? Do you think one could be reached soon?
Yes, possibly it will happen, because this is the third time Benjamin Netanyahu, within the sixth time of President Trump in power in the White House. Never happened that a country president or country prime minister to visit America for 3 times. I think America under pressure, and also Israel under more pressure. Suitable, very possible that those time frame of 60 days, 2 months of ceasefire, hopefully it will lead to stop of the war. But ceasefire will be beneficial for both sides, for Hamas to restore their power and to think about again what is the future of the area. and then Israel itself to think properly how the next phase, which is the most important phase, what is the day, what is the second day after the war? Nobody really in the region, starting from America itself, are ready to answer. So I am positive that within the next few days, something happen will be very positive.
Well, gentlemen, we shall keep watching closely and see what happens in the next few days. Whether it will be in the next few days or the next 10 days, we hope for some kind of ceasefire, then a lasting peace agreement after that, but it remains to be seen. From Cairo, that was Ahmed Meherem, who is a writer and political analyst, and also we were joined by international specialist Dr. Mohammed Osman. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Now, today, July 11th, 2025, Gaza bleeds as the world watches. Between diplomatic maneuvers and deadly airstrikes, civilians remain trapped in a conflict with no clear end in sight. The path to peace demands not only negotiations, but also accountability, vision, and the will to end the bloodshed. Until that day comes, Gaza remains a battlefield, not just of war, but of conscience. And that's all for our special coverage today. Thank you for joining us, and we continue to bring you in-depth perspectives on the world's most pressing issues. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.